Happy Monday. The question posed was, how do we know when we are having success with forgiveness? Now, forgiveness is a command. We are commanded to forgive, and we want to be obedient in that command. But it's a little harder than some other things to determine whether or not we're succeeding. Are we failing to forgive, even when we're trying to forgive? The first thing I want to look at is sin. From my studies of sin, and what the Bible indicates as a definition of sin says is that sin is willful disobedience to God or to his will. Now, willful is the important part because it shows that it's something that we are doing aware of and on purpose. We know that we're doing it and we are doing it anyway. So with that in mind, it's a little harder to ascertain your success in some things than others. And that's because sin begins in the heart. And sometimes sin is fully executed in the heart. It doesn't always have to come out as an action in order for it to be sin. As we know, the Bible says, if you know to do good and do not do it, well, then that can be sin. Okay, so thoughts also can be sin. They can be sin right at that level. When you speak about the heart, a lot of times what we're talking about is the thoughts, the will and the emotion. So thought can be sin, but it's not necessarily sin either. I mean, obviously we have good thoughts, but even bad thoughts are not necessarily sin. So take, as an example, don't think of a pink elephant. Well, you just did, whether you liked it or not. You didn't mean to, you didn't choose to. It wasn't your idea, it was my idea. So I put that thought there. Now, a thought, let's say a lustful thought that comes to your mind. People think, I had a lustful thought, therefore I lusted, therefore I sinned. I don't necessarily agree with that. I think a thought can be sin, but I don't think necessarily. Because again, we don't always choose our thoughts. There's so much taking place in our brain that is not on the conscious level or intentional level. And we can go into neuroscience to see the depths of that, and it's staggering. So don't dismiss thoughts as sin, even if those thoughts are not good. Now, what we do with those thoughts obviously is important, more important, and that could maybe indicate whether or not it turns into sin. But when it comes to forgiveness, there's not only thoughts that are associated with forgiveness because there's a hurt, a past hurt, and a memory of it, but there's also feelings. And when you think of those things or the person and the things that that person has done, those same feelings are not gone simply because you have committed yourself to forgiving. Even if you've told that person that you forgive that person, even if you've told God you forgive that person, and even if you're convinced that you've forgiven that person, that doesn't mean the feelings go away and it's all forgotten. So what do we do with that? What do we do when the feelings resurface as a result of being reminded of a person or of an offense? Well, I think we need to be able to look at our efforts. I really do think that's important. To me, efforts are very important. Intentions are important. So 2 Peter chapter 1, verse 5 says, make every effort to add to yourselves things like patience and kindness and things of that nature. So it's showing you that, or it's asking you and telling you to make an effort. And I think that effort is very pertinent. I think we need to look at the effort that we're making. I think God does, and I think he honors efforts because our ability to accomplish something as intangible sometimes as forgiveness when there's feelings and memory involved, I think it takes more than just saying yes or no, right or wrong, black or white. And don't get me wrong, I think most of the Bible is black and white. But even like loving God with all your heart, that's not black and white. That's something that you grade yourself based on your efforts to do so. Are you doing the best you know how? And so that's what I would look at when it comes to forgiveness and ascertaining success. I also think of spiritual warfare. When you forgive someone and you still have those thoughts and still have those feelings associated with the offense and the way it made you feel, well, in a way you could say God's allowing that. Now, why would he do that? I think there's a purpose for that personally. I think it's an opportunity for you and I to go to warfare, spiritual warfare on a person's behalf. Because as we know, the Bible says our battles are not against flesh and blood, no matter how much we've been hurt by someone. And the more we're hurt by someone, the more we know what that person needs, probably better than anybody else. So we can take that knowledge and we can go to God and pray for that person on that person's behalf. And I think that is part of how we sign up as soldiers of Christ and are willing to love. Now, love is sacrifice. So I can think of few things more honorable than taking on yourself the responsibility to experience emotions and bad feelings willfully for the sake of being able to go to war for that person in the spiritual realms. I think it's a very honorable thing. And I do believe that God honors that. Now, I would say I tend to think of looking at the rest of my life as a litmus test, because sin is deceitful and it's influential and it spreads. You ever seen a drop of ink placed into a glass of water? It spreads slowly like tentacles. I think that's a good analogy or metaphor for how sin can creep into our lives. It doesn't stay visible in one area. If you are living in sin, if you are not making an effort that you could be making, if you could be doing better, usually if there's sin in your life, it's going to manifest in other areas. It won't stay isolated to one little area. That's not how sin is. Sin spreads and it infects. And so if you can look at the other areas of your life and say, I'm walking in victory, except this one area I'm not sure of, I would say that's a good indication that you are walking in victory in that area. It's hard to know how to grade yourself from day to day, but I'd say grade it on your effort. I believe when you do that, when you make that effort and God honors that effort, that you will hear, well done, good and faithful servant.